The adult human brain weighs approximately 1.5 kilograms, making up less than 2% of a person's body weight, and yet the cerebellum is connected with the entire central nervous system through millions of connections. It defines our humanity and makes us the individuals that we are. The brain is responsible for the generation of language and thought, attention, consciousness, memory. It influences all of our cortical functioning and output, and has a particular influence on motor functions that we will focus on here, and imagination. In order to fit into the skull and accommodate the massive number of neurons and connections needed, the brain is highly folded. The visual system is specialized to take visual information, essentially photons, and compose them into a coherent picture of our world. The visual pathway begins, of course, in the eye. It receives information about our muscle and joint position, or proprioceptive information, balance, or vestibular information, as well as vast connections to and from the cerebral cortex. This makes the cerebellum the coordinator, and this system will need precise information about the position of our limbs so that movements can be coordinated and initiated from the correct starting point. In this system, ongoing movement patterns are coordinated, and error detection systems allow for the immediate correction of the movement. Predictor of cortical output, and it is responsible for a sort of quality control and constant error correction. We'll start with an anatomical overview and then take a closer look at each one of these systems. The tentorium cerebelli, a dural reflection, isolates it in the posterior cranial fossa. It is connected to the brainstem through 3 cerebellar peduncles. Here, the cerebellum is detached from the brainstem. This is the anterior surface with the cerebellar peduncles that connect it to the brainstem, and inferior cerebellar peduncle. This little bit of cerebellum here is the flocculus. It is connected to the nodule here, and together they form the flocculonodular lobe. The creation of gyri or ridges and sulci or furrows. If we were to unfold the entire human brain, it would take up approximately 1 square meter. The flocculonodular lobe is responsible for balance. This is the posterior surface. In the midline, you can see the vermis. The cerebellum is connected with the entire central nervous system through millions of connections. It influences all of our cortical functioning and output, and has a particular influence on motor functions that we will focus on here. It receives information about our muscle and joint position, or proprioceptive information, balance, or vestibular information, as well as vast connections to and from the cerebral cortex. This makes the cerebellum the coordinator and predictor of cortical output, and it is responsible for a sort of quality control and constant error correction.
A rocking ship, so every time I took a step, my feet felt like they were going beneath the floor, and then they were floating up off the floor.
This is the superior surface, and this is the inferior surface. The cerebellum sits on foramen magnum, and in cases with increased intracranial pressure,
a few feet even. So it felt as though my proprioceptive system wasn't quite coordinating properly or something. I wasn't receiving the depth of the space around me. I could see where the floor was, but my senses were telling me something else.
This inferior bit of the cerebellum, the cerebellar tonsils, can herniate into foramen magnum and press onto the brainstem.
And you rehearse that, and I also trained that way, and I've been doing it for so long now, almost 20 years, that it feels sort of like second nature.
You can see how the different parts of the cerebellum are folded and then folded again. This results in a tremendous increase in surface area.
You get used to tracking where you are in space in these most minute kind of ways. You get used to tracking your senses in connection to touch and weight and flow.
We'll start with an anatomical overview and then take a closer look at each one of these systems, which allows the accommodation of millions of neurons. In fact, more than the largest part of the cerebellum has reciprocal connections with the cerebral cortex. From a motor perspective, it is here that fine coordination of complex movement patterns is coordinated. The cerebellum can analyze the movement patterns of people and objects around us, predict the consequence of these movements, and adjust our movement accordingly.
Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing a little bit of a mini haul video. So basically I'm just going to be showing you a few things that I've purchased and or received or whatever over the last month, which is really not that much stuff, but everything that I got I'm really excited about, so I thought that I would just share it with you all. Everything that I got I'm really excited about, so I thought that I would just share it with you all. The first thing that I got is from an amazing company called adoreme.com. I'm sure you guys have probably heard about that before. At this point that I realized that I really have to frickin' pee, and yeah, feel much better after that. Ooh, look, done. My hair, I have a tutorial on this, so you can just watch that if you want to see how I do it. And I just powder my face with the Stay Matte powder by Rimmel. I use a darker color in it because I try and darken up my face because my face is paler than my body. I look way better with hardly using anything.
What does the cerebellum do with this exceptional computing power? From an evolutionary perspective,
that I got. So again, I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I will have all my social medias and everything linked down below. Definitely follow me on my Instagram if you want to communicate with me. That's where I comment back the most to people who comment on my photos and whatnot. I have my Twitter, Snapchat, Tumblr, everything linked down below, and I'll have all of the items that I purchased. I'll try and link everything down below for you all if you guys want to purchase what I purchased. So I hope that you guys like this, and I will talk to you all very soon.
from there, projections go to the lower motor neuron system in the spinal cord to ensure truncal stability. The next system to develop in the cerebellar circuitry is involved in the coordination of gait and limb movement.